Okay, we're going to look at some of the informational material back in your appendix. The first one we're going to talk about is helpful phrases in mediation. Helpful phrases in mediation. Now, in my book that I use, and I use the same manual, this little black folder that I use, that I take to all my mediations, and I have this in there because sometimes, even though I've done 800 plus of these mediations, sometimes you can get brain dead. You know, I mean, you can. You can just, your brain will freeze up and it's like, you know, what am I doing? Where am I at? You know, oh, this is it, okay. But no, because you're so intense, you're so involved in listening to these folks' problems, and you're paying so much attention to them that sometimes you need a reminder about types of questions to ask. Helpful phrases in mediation is in this section in the appendix. In the mediator introduction, some things you might say, are you comfortable enough to proceed? Now this would be, you know, if someone obviously is nervous or crying, one of those type things. What is your understanding of what is to take place during this session? You know, that's another good mediator question to, especially if people are not on point, if people are being disruptive. The next section, problem identification and clarification. How has this incident changed your life? How has this affected your life? Is there anything you would particularly like to say to the other person? Now, obviously, it's not obvious. This may not be in caucus. You know, you've got the other person sitting there, and you know, you can tell by reading people's body language that maybe there is something they would just like to say that maybe doesn't fit the moment or maybe not fit the situation, but they just something they'd like to say. Ask them that. What else do you think is important? How has this experience affected you? Now that's different from how has this incident changed your life? How do you feel about this incident overall? Is there anything else you care to add? It seems to me you are saying, or it seems to me you're feeling, or it seems to me, and then you follow that up with an open-ended question. What do you want the other person to remember most about what's happened? Is there anything we still need to address? And are there issues you would still like to discuss? On generating options, here's a good list of questions. And like I said, this is not a finite list, but these are good general questions to ask in moments when, you know, maybe you haven't thought about asking these questions. In generating options, how would you like to see this situation resolved? What are you willing to do to resolve this problem? I like that question, one of my favorite. What are you willing to do to resolve this problem? Okay? Instead of what is the other person, what do you want the other person to do? What is it that you're willing to do to resolve this? What options do you see to take care of these problems? Those are possible solutions. What else could you suggest? You know, because people's typically their first resolution is going to be, well, you know, if we could just kill that person, the problem would go away. Well, okay, I understand that that's what you'd like to see happen, but let's say that that doesn't happen. What would be the next best solution? Okay. What do you think is appropriate in this case? I like that question too. What do you think is appropriate in this case? And when whatever answer they give you back, then follow that immediately up with, why do you think that that's appropriate? Or how do you think the other person is going to respond to that? Okay. When we're talking about selection of options, ask them, what's going to be best for you? We're not asking them what's going to resolve it for them. We're not asking them what they can do to resolve the situation. We're asking them, what is best for you? What needs or interests do you have that are important here? Ask them what their needs are. Ask them what their interests are by specifically using those terms. What are the priority problems for you? What do you suggest the other side focus their efforts on primarily? What would you like to see them focus on? And this is obviously a closed-end question, but can you see any problems developing? Actually, you should probably change that around and say, what possible problems do you see developing from this taking place? When do you think, or what do you think should occur? What do you think is appropriate in this case? What do you think is appropriate in this situation? What do you think is appropriate for what we've heard here today? When we're talking about an imbalance of power, where you have someone, a passive party, someone who's letting the other side just run all over them, you know, you can ask them, what do you want to accomplish here today? And you can also throw this out here. If someone's been non-responsive, you can say, well, we haven't heard from you today, or I haven't heard from you about this situation. What are your feelings about that point? How do you feel about this? A couple of good questions to ask in impasse. What would it take for you to continue this session? You know, if people are just ready to give up, ask them, well, what would it take for you to continue this session? And then go into the reality testing. Then do the follow-up questions. What is your relationship going to be 3 weeks from now? You know, in the divorce case I was talking about, where the lady was just giving up everything, you know, I knew that she was going to need to have a place to sleep. I knew she was going to need a place to have to fix her breakfast the next day. So I asked her those things. So where are you going to sleep tonight? Okay. Now, you got to be careful the way you ask that, because you don't want to act like you're propositioning them. But, you know, you want to ask in a empathetic, you know, well, if you give up all your furniture, where are you going to be sleeping? If you give up all your kitchen goods, how are you going to prepare your meals? Okay. Also, if you're at an impasse, you could just simply ask the question, let's identify some common interest. What is it that you both agree upon? Well, we don't agree upon anything. Well, that's, you know, you've agreed to meet here for mediation. You agreed to whatever the original contract was. You've agreed to do business with each other for whatever the period of time is. You've made those agreements. You've agreed to use first names here. So what else? What are the other things that you might agree on, that you have agreed on in the past? And then that leads us up to focusing on the past. You know, a good mediator question or statement really is, we can't change what's happened in the past, let's focus on the future. When people are dwelling about the past, we can't change what's happened in the past, let's focus on the future. Let's focus on what's going to happen next week or the week after. On clarifying issues, some good mediator questions are, as I understand your situation, and all you're doing is restating, please correct me if I'm wrong. Only use that statement once, because you don't want to continually remind them that you may be wrong. Could I ask a few questions to clarify my mind? And let's see if I understand what you're saying. On interruptions, some good mediator questions on interruptions. We agree to the ground rules of not interrupting and to focus on the issues. Just one person talk at a time, please. Byron, go ahead and continue. But poor Byron, I've got him being interrupted all the time. He's just so, you know, of course he's carrying that weapon around. He probably never gets interrupted. On fear and distress between parties, a good question would be, what is it that you're afraid is going to happen in mediation? What is it you're afraid is going to happen here? I ask that question a lot, especially when people are they're not agreeing on anything. I say, what is it you're afraid is going to happen? Well, I don't know. Well, let's think about things that could happen. Well, we might actually resolve this. Okay, well, how would that be if we resolve this? So what do we need to do to resolve this? And on saving face, some good questions to ask would be, some people have found it helpful if, or let's put this aside for now. Also a good way to save face is to go into caucus. But a good face-saving question is, if it hasn't been done in the past, then is there a problem agreeing that it won't happen in the future? Okay? If it hasn't been done in the past, then is there a problem agreeing that it won't happen in the future? And these are all good mediator phrases to use and to keep handy that you can use in almost any type of mediation.